Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start the work session for October. We will begin with the roll call.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Present.
Mrs. Hall.
Here.
Mr. Siegel.
Here.
Mr. Holmes.
Here.
Mr. McGarity.
Here.
Mr. Connell.
Here.
Mr. Wexler.
Here.
Mr. Heilman, I believe, is on his way, and Mr. Oliva.
Here. It's the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, we're going to start off with a short presentation. Amy?
Yes, you may recall, Commissioners, a few years ago, we discussed delinquent sewer and trash collections, and at that time, we decided to engage our business tax attorneys to assist us with collecting some of those. They have expressed a desire to really specify and concentrate on the business tax collections. So we would like the board to consider engaging another attorney who specializes in collection of delinquent sewer and trash, and that is Michelle Portnoy. And she is here tonight to give a brief explanation of what she could do for the township. Just a little bit of background. Right now, we have about $234,000 of outstanding sewer and trash, which really is not bad considering that we bill about almost $5 million in sewer a year and about $3 million in trash a year. So it really does say that our collections are good. However, there's approximately 27 property owners that we classify as habitual that do not pay each year, and they're the accounts that we would like Ms. Portnoy to assist us with. So if I could bring Ms. Portnoy up and she can give a brief explanation of what her firm can provide.
Sure.
Thank you very much. I have handouts.
Come up.
Great.
Come up to the microphone and
Thank you very much for inviting me here this evening. My name is Michelle Portnoy. I'm a lawyer. My office is in Norristown. We have been in practice for 25 years. We represent more than 100 taxing districts throughout the state of Pennsylvania, including 11 here in Delaware County. And our practice is limited to the collection of unpaid real estate taxes and municipal user fees, such as the sewer and trash fees that are at issue here. We utilize the provisions of the Municipal Claims and Tax Liens Act, which is a law that enables a municipality to pass through the fair and reasonable costs of collection upon the delinquent property owner. And the process is a very straightforward one. It starts with the mailing of a notice of delinquency to the delinquent property owner. We notify the property owner of the balance that's due. We give them 30 days within which to make payment arrangements, and the payment arrangements are established by the municipality. The vast majority of our municipal clients offer payment arrangements that are, if the balance is $500 or less, it's got to be paid within 30 days. If it's $500 to $1,500, it's got to be paid within 90 days. If it's over $1,500, it's got to be paid within 6 months. But that's something that is within the authority of the municipality to establish. That notice also notifies the property owners of the availability of a hardship program. On behalf of all of our clients, we administer a hardship program so that owner-occupants who are experiencing financial difficulties have the ability to pay their delinquencies consistent with their means, and they are put on such a program. The last component of that notice is a schedule of the fees to be imposed in the event that further collection proceedings are required. So what we have found, and this is true really statewide, is somewhere between 40 and 45% of the property owners who receive that notice make arrangements for payment within that initial period of time. That's not to say that they pay 100 cents in the dollar in that period of time, but they'll call up, they'll work out a payment plan that's acceptable to the municipality, and therefore the only charge that they pay is the $40 that we charge plus the cost of postage. All of the all of the penalty, any accrued interest is remitted back to the township. We remit on a weekly basis so that as soon as the money is in our hands, it's over into your hands. In the event we don't hear from a property owner during that initial period of time, we will proceed with further collection proceedings. We do not charge a percentage. We charge a flat fee that is consistent with the schedule that's enclosed in that original notice, so that as soon as the property owner contacts our office to make arrangements for payment, the meter stops running and the debt is worked out, usually in some payment. We comply with, at least we try to comply with all of the relevant laws concerning the Municipal Claims and Tax Liens Act, as well as all of the consumer protection statutes. We have an attorney in the office whose responsibility it is for compliance. That's to make sure that everything that we are doing is, to the best of our ability, compliant with the both state and federal consumer protection statutes. Having said that, that is developing law, and we are on some shifting sands. Our office has been sued. I would be happy to review the details of any of those suits in executive session, or to provide you with any information that you'd like concerning them. We are fully accountable for the work that we do, and are accountable specifically that everything that we are doing is in accordance with all relevant laws, and our contract provides that. The cost to the municipality is that we charge the municipality the $40 plus postage that goes with that initial mailing. That charge can be added to the claim. Actually, I think at this point, all of our municipal clients are adding that charge to the claim. And when that is collected from the delinquent property owner, it is remitted back to the township. All of the other fees and costs that are added to the claim are, we look to the property owner for repayment of those costs. And that, in a nutshell, is what we do.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I do. I have some concern about residents who really do have a hardship and cannot pay their taxes, whether it be a family or senior citizens.
For business?
And I don't recommend, my concern is I don't recommend that the township put a minimum amount of money for them to pay back the township. I'm really concerned about that. In a bad economy and with people still out of work, I do have concerns about that. It's up to the rest of the board, but that's just my personal feeling. So I don't know how you or other municipalities handled that.
Well, first, I feel that our hardship program is the jewel of our practice, because we try very hard to identify as early on in the process as possible those people who are experiencing financial difficulties. And what we do when we are hired by a new municipality is we ask them to issue a press release. We can develop the press release and provide it, but we want as many people to know this is coming as possible, because the goal of this is to encourage people to pay without any additional charges, and ideally to pay their current bills on time. With respect to the hardship program, we ask all of our municipal clients, and at this point we're doing this for our municipal clients, to delegate to our office the responsibility of reviewing the financial information and working out a payment plan. One question that's often asked of me, is there a minimum amount that people would have to pay? And my answer to that is that there is nobody that's going to want somebody to have to choose between paying for food or paying their sewer and trash bills. In that type of a situation, what we do is we flag the file, we take no further action. To the extent that a lien has been filed, the municipality is protected for a 20-year period of time. The question that you raised about how do we make sure that that there's no charge for these people, what we normally do is charge the $40 plus postage and hope that we can flag them in the beginning. That is a charge that covers basically, all of the bookkeeping, all the notices, all of the communications that we have with the property owners. Everything we do with a property owner is confirmed in writing so that there's clarity of the transaction. The municipality can waive that charge as to the person who's on a hardship. What we normally do is ask that we have a point person at the municipality.
Okay, and the lawsuits, you mentioned lawsuits, I would recommend that we do hear about those in executive session. And my third question is, did we seek out other law firms, or is this the only one that we're looking at? Did we put it out to bid, or
Now, this is something, it's not a biddable.
we don't put it out to bid?
It's not a
So did we,
biddable
did we,
service.
Yeah, we have.
We have.
She comes highly recommended, and other, as we say, Mr. Siegel will make comment.
Yeah, I had some extensive conversations with Ms. Portnoy before tonight, just raising my questions and concerns, and I'm very comfortable with using her firm for these services.
so you questioned her before the meeting?
I spoke to her on the phone, yeah.
Why? I mean, why not do it while, I mean, ask questions in public in front of us, no?
Yeah, some questions I thought were more appropriate for private conversation.
And can you tell us what the nature of those questions were, or no? Or can you tell me later if you can't?
Yeah, I mean, like anyone who does this kind of work, they get involved in litigation. Some of it, can be positive. Some of it can generate negative publicity, and, I wanted to know about that. I also inquired in terms of her firm's background in terms of professional responsibility, which was impeccable. And those are not the kind of questions you normally just want to bring up in public generally, because if there is a problem, I'd want to know, but there were none.
I just wanted to add to Commissioner D'Amelio's concerns about the, collection process. The only accounts that we would even be interested at this point in getting Ms. Portnoy's involvement in, right now, it's a low number, it's about 20, and they are people that, like I said, habitually do not pay. We're talking multiple years, upwards of 5. We have one property
20.
owner that hasn't paid in 20 years.
Understood.
And we do send out our own periodic reminders, and again, these are property owners that haven't responded to the township sending out, nice letters of reminders. So we would just like to have a step more in compliance to help with those collections.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Ms. Portnoy, is it possible for you to characterize how many of these situations are situations that really qualify for hardship as opposed to folks that are just chronic, late payers or non-payers? I mean, obviously, Mr. D'Amelio and every commissioner up here has a concern about those folks who can't pay. Can you characterize how many of these people don't pay as opposed to how many can't pay?
Typically, the largest balance accounts are not from the poor people living on a fixed income. Just as a comparison, we were hired by Lower Merion Township, very similar situation. They were looking at sewer and trash. They were looking at habitual delinquents. And there were, first of all, probably half of them were not individual property owners. They were corporate property owners. And they were resolved relatively quickly. None of those in Lower Merion at all were hardships.
None.
None. And now that may have been, again, that was a select group. In a broader cross-section, you're going to have some people that would qualify for that, but based on...
I guess what I'm getting at is more likely than not, the person that you are going to pursue in a delinquent tax situation is somebody who would ostensibly qualify for hardship or would not qualify for hardship.
It's the vast majority of people do not qualify for hardship.
I appreciate that information. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Any further questions?
Thank you
very much. Okay, and now we'll have any commissioner committee updates? There being none, we'll start with our flooding concerns. We'll have public discussion.
You want me to make a brief presentation?
Make a brief presentation, then we'll bring people up and they can begin to. We'll keep it to 3 minutes per person, so everyone has a chance to speak. That includes you too, Dave. You got 3 minutes. Yeah, 3
I could do
minutes.
it in probably about 2.5. All right. Very similar presentation to what we've talked about, frankly, many times on issues regarding some stormwater management. Just to give a little bit of a background, what the board charged us with a while ago is to pull out what we're calling those chronic flooding areas, those areas of the township where we're seeing chronic flooding that occurs during extreme weather events. Typically, these are areas that flood when we have regional problems. Went over with Public Works, went over with staff, and we all came up with this list of 4 areas that we would call our chronic flooding areas. And this is in a map of the entire township. I'm going to have some more legible details, but you can see that the 4 areas are up here on Tunbridge, down here on Winfield Drive, over here in the Ridgeway area, and over here in the Chatham Glen area. And again, I'm going to put that in some more detail. One of the important things to remember as we go through this, both for me and people like Doc and Larry and for the board and the residents, this does not take into consideration the type of annual maintenance, upgrade, and stormwater projects that we do every year, and we've always done every year. Those don't go away. Everything from a collapsed culvert on Biddle that we had to fix a couple months ago to Oakford culvert that we had to fix years ago, those won't go away. Again, these are the ones that we pulled out as the 4 chronic flooding problem type areas. A little bit of more background. These issues aren't new. Most of the residents here have probably been here before and certainly experienced things before. We got township stormwater reports that go back frankly, before I was born in the 1950s that addressed areas like Winfield Drive and other areas of the townships. This township has taken on some large, and these are large-scale jobs that we're talking about here. Township has done some large-scale jobs. Jimmy will remember the big culvert was put in for the Oakmont Fire Company, Oakmont area, as a result of the Darby Road, SEPTA train tracks coming out.
Trolley tracks.
Yeah, when the trolley tracks came out. That was a 1980s project. Back in the 70s, the township installed 5 stormwater management basins up and around above Greenview to help mitigate flooding problems between Greenview and Lanark. Those are large regional type projects, and that's the type of work we're talking about here. In general, and I'll get into it quickly, so it won't take more
It's
than
okay.
3 minutes,
It's all right.
but I'll get into it in a little bit of detail. What you're going to see is a very common theme.
You can talk later.
You're going to see facilities.
I'm sorry, Dave Pannoni from Pannoni Associates. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. You're going to generally see facilities, the stormwater management facilities that are sized for what we call 10 to 25-year storm events. You're going to see that these facilities are in place in more, what we call the more dense neighborhoods of the township. In general, you're going to see that some of the standard stormwater management design that's in place today, and even just as important, some of the standard code requirements that are in place today, were obviously not in place in the 30s, 40s, and 50s when these facilities went in place. So what we're going to see is streams that are enclosed or channelized that you couldn't do today. You're going to see streams, you're going to see houses and structures that are built in places where you couldn't build today. I'm not saying it was right or wrong back at that time, but that's the realities of where we are. Most of the stuff we have here today, you couldn't see today. And in fact, what's a little bit interesting, this is Cobb's Creek. Darby Creek's along this end of the township. And what you see is that in the Darby Creek drainage basin, which is where the part of the township that was built later, the township really built from Cobb's Creek and out in general. We don't really have the type of problems, the regional problems in the Darby Creek Basin that we have in the Cobb's Creek Basin. Again, because of when those communities were built. And if you go further into the inner ring suburbs, as you go downstream along Cobb's Creek and Darby Creek, it's closer to the city. Frankly, they have more problems. So where we might have 4 problems, they might have 14 problems downstream. Facilities, and again, you're going to see as I talk a little bit, the facilities we have are in good shape. The Public Works people inspect them on a regular basis, and it's not a situation of the facilities not being in good shape. So I'm going to go Larry, how am I advancing?
Just hit the space bar.
close that thing for me. This way.
Okay. All right, 4 projects that we're going to talk about again. This is Tunbridge. Tunbridge is frankly different from the last 2 we're going to talk about, which are going to be the Chatham Glen area and the Ridgeway area. Tunbridge is an old community. There's no roads. There's minimal roadside drainage. This is Ardmore Avenue. This is Tunbridge Road. When we have an extreme rain event, Tunbridge Road floods and the road becomes impassable for vehicles and impassable for some emergency vehicles. So the Public Works actually barricades this road on a regular basis when we get a heavy rain event, and this becomes impassable. We really don't have house property damage. The water doesn't really migrate up into the houses. The solution to fix this problem is to replace the culvert under Ardmore Avenue. First thing you'd have to do, because there's no sense in doing anything upstream, and then upgrade both culverts and roadside drainage up along Tunbridge Avenue. That would take the water off the road, across Ardmore Avenue, and downstream at Tunbridge. So, like I mentioned, the problem here with Tunbridge Road is flooding, which makes the road impassable for certain vehicles, and the estimated cost is about $1.5 million to $2 million. Again, noting that these projects have been identified for a while, there's 1980, 85 reports that indicated the same issues here. And by the way, old dollar numbers are in 2014 dollars. Second one we've talked about a lot, Winfield Drive. Winfield Drive, which are the twin houses right along here. Winfield Drive was built right adjacent to Cobbs Creek. Cobbs Creek was channelized. You can see how Cobbs Creek run along here, makes a 90-degree turn, another 90-degree turn, and then gets channelized behind these houses, and then is also joined by a branch that comes down from Haverford College. That channelization was done at a time when channelization and moving of streams was not uncommon. Again, you couldn't do it today. So that channelization was built. It actually is a flood control facility. It was built by, I believe, by the Army Corps of Engineers a couple of years ago. The township was successful. We got a $1.25 million grant, rebuilt this channel because it was a piece of aging infrastructure and it was deteriorating, and upgraded that channel. So Doc and I have talked about this a lot. There is frankly not that much that can be done here, absent of floodproofing houses and addressing houses, but it is still an area that's not unsusceptible. A 100-year storm event can stay in this channel, but a 100-year storm event combined with heavy localized flows can get a little bit susceptible to the localized flooding. Again, not much more that can be done down there. There's been a lot. This township's done a lot of work on Winfield Drive. So we identified that as part of our job as an area that's susceptible to flooding, and the options there are somewhat limited to really working with the structures. The next 2 are the ones we've been talking about a lot recently, and this is the Woodmere Ridgeway Mill Road area. This is an area that this orange line is an existing storm sewer that runs from Carricong Drive up Mill and then runs up in the back of these properties all the way up towards the area of the high school. This drainage area, the drainage area down to this area is about 75 to 100 acres. Goes up above, frankly, up above the high school up to Marthart. What happens is this, again, when we talk about a common theme, this is a natural drainage pattern in this neighborhood. Before any houses were built, when it rained, that's where the water went. The houses were built, a pipe was installed. This pipe from this triple inlet on Mill Road all the way to the end is sized for about a 25-year storm. And how do we know that? And it's important how we know that. We know it because we investigated it, we surveyed it, we modeled it, and then just as important, what we saw happen in the field matched up the model. And that's important to us as engineers, because if we look at modifying anything, we want to make sure our model matches up to what we see in the field. We looked at a couple different options. The concern, I don't have to tell residents what the concern is. The concern is we have some low spots on Ridgeway and Woodmere, and that when it rains heavily, the water flows from this entire drainage basin down this low area, and it gets trapped in the low areas of Ridgeway and Woodmere, and it causes property damage, vehicles. It has no way out. So again, we're talking about that common theme of no overland relief. Today, the drainage pattern would continue all the way down there with today's standards. Back when we built them back then, it couldn't be. So we looked at a couple different options on how to get a 100-year storm event from here down to that triple inlet. And the two options we looked at were upgrading this pipe or paralleling the pipe. And what we concluded with the most cost-effective and logical alternative would be to parallel the existing pipe along Mill Road. That would intercept about 30% of the flows, effectively increasing the size of this pipe without going into that tight neighborhood and replacing that large piece of infrastructure. It would take the flow, bypass the problem area, bring it down to the triple inlet on Mill, and from Mill down, that line was replaced in the 80s or 90s when SEPTA did a bunch of work down the bottom. That's storm sewer down there has capacity for a 100-year storm. So effectively what we would do is parallel the existing older storm sewer without going in between the houses in a somewhat precarious place and parallel it by running up Mill Road. That estimated cost is about $1.5 million to $1.7 million. And we, as I mentioned to the board a couple times, we control a lot of that because that's within streets. It's not in private property, so it's a little more, we drive the bus a little bit better on that type of work. The last one is down below Chatham Glen. This is Township Line Road. Chatham Glen is up above this, if I remember, this is Foster, right? Yep. And yeah, that's Foster right there. So what we have a very similar situation. In fact, let me show you one more slide. This is a great slide. This shows you exactly what I was talking about earlier. Here's this blue line is the stream, and that's Chatham Glen. This is the way the water drained before any houses were built. And you can see that water drained, and again, that's about 300 acres of drainage that comes down into this location. Right through this.
Open creek then, right?
It was an open creek, sure. Yep. It was an open creek. It drained this way. The Glen was not dammed up. Obviously these houses weren't here, down across Township Line, down to Cobb's Creek. That's the natural drainage pattern. Again, and I know it probably sounds like a broken record. There's structures in here and there's streams enclosed that today just couldn't happen. So with that in mind, the problem we have is we have 300 acres of flow that comes down into this area, and when it hits this part of the system, the capacity is not there for 300 acres of flow during a 100-year storm. It's there for 10 and 25-year storms. It gets through, but once we start hitting the 100-year storms, which we all know have been more frequent lately, that's when we back up, and that's where we get overland flow, and that overland flow follows its natural drainage patterns, and then we have property damage. And that's what we're struggling with. Hey, Larry, I can go backwards on this, right?
Hit the arrow, backwards arrows.
So what we looked at here is again, what do we got to do to get the flow from here down to here and through the neighborhood? It's in some ways, it's as basic as what we talked about on the Ridgeway Mill Road project, which is you've got to capture the flow, pipe it through the neighborhood, and get it down below the neighborhood. Very tight neighborhood. We're talking about a lot of flow. We're talking about large pipes. We're talking about 300-acre drainage areas. And that's what we're showing here. And essentially, those of you who live there know there's a storm sewer system through there now. Essentially, this would take that storm sewer system and leave it in place, because again, the public works guys have looked at it, it's in good shape, and essentially parallel through the neighborhood. Not an easy job, tight neighborhood, large pipe. The estimated cost for that's about $4 million. We don't have quite as much control over that because there's some regulatory issues and there's a lot more private property issues. We'd have to make sure we can coordinate with PennDOT and maybe the DEP, because the bottom of that drainage area is Township Line Road. So that's the 4 major chronic flooding areas that we identified. We came up with what we hope are logical ways to address them, and we put order of magnitude costs on them. So, Mary, that was a little more than 3 minutes, but 3.5.
Dave,
so the board,
of those 4 that you, at least since my administration here, of the 4 that you just described, 2 of them Winfield Drive, we got an H2O grant to help us apply.
Winfield Drive, we got a $1.2 million grant to rebuild that flood structure in the back.
And when we recently applied for, what would be last year, we applied to FEMA.
Yep.
And were turned down for the one.
20, it's a good point, Larry. In fact, I had that in my notes, I meant to mention it. For the Chatham Glen area in 2012, actually, we made made two separate applications of FEMA. One was for the $4.some million to put the new pipe through the system. The other one was we took documented property damage and submitted to FEMA on a different grant application and said we would like federal monies to acquire properties and take the properties out of harm's way. And unfortunately, FEMA does a cost benefit analysis. In fact, those of you that were here when we talked about the grant, unfortunately for the grant part, most of the damage tends to be in the basements, and FEMA puts a discount on basement values for damage. So FEMA has a return rate, and they actually quantify and say, hey, if we're going to spend X to mitigate a problem, how much are we going to save by mitigating? And unfortunately, what FEMA did is it wrote back and said neither one of those proposals met their criteria for the return on investment. But Larry, that was actually 2012, towards the end of 2012, after one of the last rounds of flood. Very intense grant application. Commissioner Connell knows we tried to engage some local support. We lobbied hard, not me. I mean, these guys lobbied hard for it. And unfortunately, the feds did not see it the way we were hoping they would see it. So we got a good grant with Winfield Drive. We did not have any success down on the Chatham Glen area.
So Dave, what's the total for all, if you do all four?
Well, if you do all four,
About 8 million.
$8 million?
That's the high side.
well, it'd be
$8 million.
the upside would be 3.7, it would be 7 that'd be $8 million, would be the upside.
For clarification
Two,
purposes,
1.7 and
Winfield.
4.2. Pardon me?
That's
That's not anything in
That's
Winfield.
not anything at Winfield.
That's just the
Yep,
three.
that's right, that's not, thought process being we already put 1.2 into Winfield, and again, it's a different world to address any other mitigation at Winfield.
And isn't that, since that was already, there's really where else to go with that, correct?
Winfield?
Yeah.
Yeah, Winfield's kind of landlocked.
Right.
We talked about it a little bit. You'd really have to start dealing with structures, with the houses themselves
Right.
at Winfield to make a substantive impact on addressing the flood issues down there.
Yeah, the monies that went, the H2O money, as well as township capital funds went to Winfield Drive was, as Dave said, to rebuild that wall. That wall and that driveway was about to collapse. We also put infrastructure improvements into the sewer lines along Winfield Drive.
Yeah, the
which is-
stormwater, there's significant
Yeah.
fixes to that. I mean, the problem in '09 wasn't the channel at all. I mean, even though the channel was on the verge of, there were serious structural issues in the channel, the 2009 flood